Howdy folks, and welcome back at long last to Armoured Warfare with the mighty Jingles. And of course patch 0.16 is out, which is the reason I've been taking another look at Armoured Warfare, and in an unprecedented move on the internet it appears that while it's not possible to please all the people all the time, somehow Obsidian have managed to please most of the people all of the time with the changes that they've introduced in this latest patch. This patch has primarily, although not completely, been about improving the game mechanics and just generally the way the game feels to play. And in order to do that, they've had to address three major issues, the first of which is shot delay. So what they've actually done here is they've improved how the physical shell which exits the gun barrel when you've pressed the firing button is modelled, in order to mitigate this whole shot delay issue that players have been experiencing. They minimised the delay of network packet processing on the client and the server for shot requests by making sure that they're now sent and processed with the highest priority. They've also added predicted weapon firing on your client, which now also spawns the shot immediately when the trigger is pulled, instead of waiting for the server to first confirm the shot. And they've added server-side lag compensation when they're simulating the physics for the projectile to improve the effects of network latency. Now that all sounds very complicated, but what it actually means, until this patch came out, I hadn't realised just exactly how much I was subconsciously compensating for the effect of shot delay in the game. And now, it just feels so much better. There's no other way I can put it. It just feels right. You aim at the target, you pull the trigger, and what happens next is what should happen next, and it just feels right. Now, I play with a pretty rock-solid network connection, and any issues with shot delay in the past that I'd experienced, I'd just put down to a momentary lag spike. I'd never really consciously realised how much it had been affecting the way I played and the way the game felt. Those of you, on the other hand, who do play with a less than solid internet connection should find that this one change alone is going to dramatically improve the way the game feels when you're playing. The next issue that they've addressed, which had the capacity to seriously irritate the player base, was incorrect turret facing, and this simply means that you're looking at a tank and his gun and his turret pointing in a different direction, and so you pop out to take the shot and you get spanked for a colossal amount of damage because he was actually pointing the gun at you, even though on your client that did not appear to be the case. Well, this desync between where the server thinks the enemy tank's gun is pointing and where you think the enemy tank's gun is pointing has now been addressed and should be a thing of the past. And the final major change that they've implemented to the game mechanics is to do with shot normalization, and this actually has pretty huge ramifications for PvP in Armoured Warfare, but I'll explain that in a moment. First, you need to understand what shot normalization actually is. When you fire an armor-piercing projectile at an armoured target that has sloped armour, any kind of armour that's at an angle to where you're firing from, normalization happens. And what that means is that the shot leaves the gun barrel and travels in, well, it doesn't travel in a straight line, there are some ballistics involved, but for the sake of the explanation we'll just say it travels in a straight line from your gun barrel in a direct line towards the target that you're aiming at. But when it hits that target, if the armour is sloped or angled, what happens is the tip of the projectile begins to screw into the armour, but the rear of the projectile is still trying to move forward, and so it lifts slightly, and that flattens the angle at which your projectile has actually hit the armour and increases the chance of penetration. So if you hit armour with an armour-piercing projectile at an angle of, say, 60 degrees, at which point there's a high chance of a ricochet, but it's an armour-piercing projectile, normalization occurs and that angle gets reduced to maybe as much as 55 degrees. Which is obviously going to increase the chance that you're going to penetrate the armour and decrease the chance that it's just going to ricochet off. Now, prior to this patch, what had been happening in Armoured Warfare was that if you hit anything on the exterior of the tank, like the tracks, the gun, any ancillary and completely cosmetic equipment like toolboxes, spare wheels for the tracks, they were triggering the normalization process. As of this patch, that's no longer happening. So what does that mean for you as a player? How does that actually change the gameplay experience? Well, it's actually quite significant, and I'll explain why. Let's say, for example, you're facing an enemy tank, and you've angled your side at 70 degrees, which is an automatic ricochet, and the enemy tank fires, the shot goes into your tracks. What should happen is perhaps your tracks get blown off, but you don't get the side armour penetrated because it's an automatic ricochet angle. But what had been happening was that the shot would go into the tracks would get blown off, and the tracks would then normalise the shell so that suddenly it's hitting your side armour at an angle of less than 70 degrees, and you'd find that your side was being penetrated from almost direct front shots. Well, that shouldn't happen anymore. Now, shot normalization should only occur for armor-piercing ammunition when it actually strikes the armor of your vehicle. Not when it strikes the tracks, not when it hits the gun, not when it hits somebody's satchel strapped to the side of the turret. Now, this should have pretty huge implications in PvP, because armor angling in Armored Warfare, due to the way that the game reflects modern tank combat, where you have guns firing ammunition with ridiculous amounts of penetration, and the main battle tanks therefore have ridiculous amounts of effective frontal armour, but relatively weak side and rear armour by comparison, meant that attempting to angle a tank in Armoured Warfare by more than 15 degrees was just begging to have your side penetrated, made particularly more so by the fact that the shot normalisation was being triggered when the shells were hitting your tracks. Now, what this meant in Armoured Warfare PvP was that if you didn't have the front of your tank pointed squarely towards the threat, you were going to get punished. Tanks in Armoured Warfare in a PvP match that get themselves outflanked lose health very, very quickly because the side armour just wasn't designed to stop main battle tank armour-piercing ammunition. What that meant in practice was that when you're playing a PvP match in Armoured Warfare and your team starts losing a couple of tanks, it tends to have a snowball effect because suddenly the enemy tanks have more opportunity to get around your flanks and pummel the weak side armour that you have, and so you would lose more tanks, and it was just increasingly difficult to come back from that when you're getting fired on from all different sides. And so, in my experience, limited though it is in Armoured Warfare PvP, once a team started losing tanks, it was very, very difficult for them to come back and win. Now, what this should mean for PvP is that, let's say for example you're buddied up with another tank and the two of you are trying to hold down a sector, and the tank on your right gets taken out by a target in front of him while you're trying to defend your sector from tanks in front of you. The enemy tank that took him out is 30 degrees away off to your right. It should no longer be as easy for that tank to just sit in the same location and reliably penetrate the side of your tank and force you to fall back and give ground. With this change, if you find yourself in that sort of situation in a PvP match, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to fall back and find better cover. With some careful angling, and it will have to be careful angling because these are still bloody big guns shooting back at you and your side armour is still not that good, but it should mean that getting partially outflanked in that kind of situation does not necessarily mean that the enemy tanks have got free rein to penetrate your side, because their shots are being normalised when they hit your tracks. And hopefully that means that we're not going to continue to see such one-sided PvP matches where one team completely dominates as soon as the enemy team starts to lose a couple of tanks. However, Obsidian giveth and Obsidian taketh away. Let's flip that situation on its head. Let's say you're on the enemy team and you've managed to take out one of two tanks that are holding down the sector, which gives you a shot at an angle of around about 30 degrees into the side armour of the remaining defending tank. But thanks to this change, you're not as reliably able to penetrate his side armour from that kind of angle. You're going to have to move your arse and get a better flanking position. Obsidian have introduced a new equipment module, the improved Autoloader, and if you're in a main battle tank, what that does is it improves your rate of fire by 5%, but only while you're moving. So stop camping, get off your arse, you're in a tank, it's supposed to be able to move. The improved autoloader is obviously only available on tanks that actually have autoloaders, so we're talking about all of the tier 10s with their 140mm autoloaders, and we're talking primarily here about the Soviet and Chinese tanks from the T64 up. But it's not all about the main battle tanks. There are other vehicles in the game that use autoloader systems. Some of the tank destroyers do, such as the tier 8 M1182 MGS, and on a tank destroyer the improved autoloader mechanism has the effect of increasing your rate of fire by 5%, but only when you're stationary. And last but not least, any vehicles equipped with autocannons or anti-tank guided missile launchers that operate with an autoloader get a 5% bonus to their salvo reload speed with the improved autoloader unlocked and equipped. The only downside of this is that, well, it doesn't come for free. If you're like me and you've got a lot of vehicles in your garage that can actually take advantage of the improved autoloader, it's going to cost you a lot of money to refit them all with this new technology. They've also radically overhauled the sound effects of the game, and this, in combination with the changes to the shot delay mechanics, really does make the game feel so much better to play. I never had a problem with the sound effects in Armored Warfare. In fact, I thought that the Armored Warfare sound effects were one of the best things about the game. The guns always sounded meaty. I thought the engine and general vehicle noises were always very, very good, particularly if your vehicle had sustained damage. You could always tell just exactly how badly beaten up your tank was, just by listening to the way it sounded. You could hear the tracks clattering, you could hear the gears in the engine grinding against each other. The sound effects have always been very, very good in this game, but now they're just, well, they're just better. In particular, vehicles that have turbine engines. Get a load of this engine startup sound. Demonstrated for us on this occasion by the Tier 10 Challenger 2 ATDU, and I am going to crank the volume up here, so headphone users beware. And it's not just my Challenger 2, but you can hear the turbines firing up in all of the other tanks around me as well. Doesn't it sound glorious?
Black Company, there is no time to lose. The NPAA shot down one of our choppers and they're closing in on them. There's critical intel in there that we need. Get over there and secure that bird.
The sound effects as a whole are noticeably improved, which I thought was, well, like I said, I didn't have a problem with the sound effects in the first place. Everything just sounds... It sounds more like a tank. And wait until you hear the guns fire. The 140mm gun on this thing. Listen to this.
Do not let them expand into this area.
Oh, did you hear that? I'm going to do it again. Oh, yes. Oh, I think I need to go and change my pants. They've tinkered around with the game so much in this patch to make improvements to the way it feels when you're playing it. Whether that's the fixes to the shot delay mechanics, whether that's the improved sound effects, and if you're listening to this, by the way, through headphones, with decent bass reproduction, or you've got yourself a subwoofer on your desktop PC setup, that bass rumble when these guns go off is nothing short of glorious. They've also changed the way the vehicles interact with some of the minor terrain features, like stacks of pipes lying around on the ground, fences, small parked cars, crates and all that sort of thing, so that it just feels more like you're driving a 70-ton vehicle that really shouldn't be impeded as much by minor little features like this, and it all goes towards making the game feel more like you're actually taking charge of a heavily armoured, heavy, powerful armoured war machine. This really has been a very, very good patch for Armoured Warfare, and if that was all that they'd done, well, that would have been good enough, but the patch introduces a whole lot more as well. You may have noticed as you've been watching the video that there's something new going on. These icons keep popping up every time I spot a tank, hit a tank, shoot at a tank, kill a tank, and so on and so on. Armoured Warfare have introduced a commendation system. Now, it doesn't actually do anything. You're not going to receive any additional awards based on the number of commendations that you receive during a game. It's basically just like the medal ribbons that pop up every time you do something similar in a game like World of Tanks or World of Warships. It's basically just a piece of harmless fluff. It doesn't really change the game experience in any major way at all, but, well, the one annoying feature was that the default sound effects that pop up when these icons appear, when you earn these commendations, were so annoying. It made me feel like I was playing a game of Super Mario Brothers rather than Armoured Warfare, but you'll be happy to know that if, like me, the sound effects get on your tits, you can disable the sound effects associated with the commendation pop-ups in the settings menu. Also in this patch, they've finally implemented the long-awaited loot reward system. Now, what happens here is it doesn't matter whether you're playing PvP or PvE, do well in the match, and it doesn't matter whether you're on the winning team or not, it's based purely on your own performance, and there's a chance that in the post-battle results you're going to find you've been rewarded with a loot crate. And here it is in action. Now, what we're looking at here are the results of a particularly challenging match in my Challenger 2 ATDU on the Stormy Winter map, where As usual on Stormy Winter, some genius on the team triggers the final spawn of enemy tanks before the team were ready, and we had a really hard-fought victory there. But you can see that even though I didn't come top of the team on reputation earned, I still managed to earn a gold loot crate. And what's in the gold loot crate? Well, let's open it and have a look. Alright, well, I know what a fire extinguisher and 30,000 credits are, but what's a gold battlefield glory boost, and what are these insignias? Well, these are further new additions to the game that are part and parcel of the loot system. The gold battlefield boost lasts 12 hours, and it provides massive buffs to my commander and crew XP, credits earned, global and base reputation, and it's activated by dragging it and dropping it into one of the active boost slots down there in the bottom right corner. And you'll notice that there are 2 of these global boost slots. Anybody can use the first one, and the second one is for an additional boost, which will cost you 100 gold, but will allow you to have 2 of these boosts running at any given time. So what are these insignias? Unlike the boosts, which are global and affect every vehicle that you play for the duration of the boost, insignias are one-shot items which boost all different kind of things, but only last the next battle that you play. There is an option to automatically replenish them, and you equip them in exactly the same way that you'd equip any other consumable. So we're going to take the brand spanking new Tier 10 T15 HIFV, which is also a new feature in patch 0.16, out for a spin, with various different insignias equipped, running a premium account. And while we're here, we're going to activate both of the global boost slots, and we're going to take this machine out for a spin and see what kind of rewards you can expect to achieve if you're running with these kind of buffs. And here it is, the T15 Heavy infantry fighting vehicle. It's based on the chassis of the Russian Federation's T14 Armata main battle tank, and as you'd expect, it's as tough as old boots. Look at the sloping on the front of this thing. The effective frontal armour against armour piercing on this infantry fighting vehicle is 777mm of frontal armour. And that's against armour piercing. Against shaped charge ammunition from the front, this thing can expect to defeat anything with penetration up to 1260mm. The turret, of course, is the weakness, but it's an unmanned turret. And in armoured warfare, you're highly unlikely to be able to knock out an armoured vehicle by taking potshots at things like the commander's hatch, the gunner's periscope, and unmanned turrets. That doesn't mean you can't do damage to the vehicle, but your shot is not going to do the full damage range when you're shooting at inconsequential parts of the vehicle like this. In order to actually do full damage with your shots, you have to strike the main body of the vehicle and penetrate the armour. And so while the T15 is going to take damage if the turret gets hit, because the armour on the turret is pretty flimsy, it's going to damage the weapon system, but the crew are going to be perfectly safe. It's the whole point of having an unmanned turret. It's also blisteringly fast, but having a vehicle as long as this with such a small rear-mounted turret does come with some disadvantages. It has god-awful gun depression, so if you find yourself in a position like this, which isn't going to be unusual in a scout vehicle in armoured warfare, which is what this is, on high ground, trying to get shots at vehicles which are on a lower elevation, forget about using the 30mm autocannon. It just does not have the gun depression. Instead, you're going to find yourself using the quadruple missile launchers that this thing is equipped with, and they're not bad at all. Teammate was pinging the map there, and oh, yep, we've missed one of the secondary objectives, and I'm the fastest machine on the team, so I'll go back and deal with it. Let's switch to the autocannon. There's a supply, there it is. Missed that supply truck. I must have driven right past it without noticing. There we go, secondary objectives complete. Right, let's capture this oil refinery. Look at this thing move. I told you it was fast. I love driving machine. I find that it's not as fast as some of the wheeled infantry fighting vehicles, although it's not that much slower, but it's because it's tracked, it's just that much easier to control the thing. Right, okay. A Challenger 2. I'm not going to penetrate him with the autocannon, but I can at least designate him as a target for the rest of the team, and I'll get a share of whatever they earn for doing damage to him. Come on. Challenger 2 ATDU is a really tough target. Even at the rear, firing shape charged missiles, it's got all that cage armour, it's got ERA armour, it's just a tough nut to crack. But the, I think, 240mm of penetration with the armour-piercing ammunition on this 30mm is, well, it's easily good enough to deal with things like light tanks. And while I definitely can't penetrate the armour of something like a Challenger 2 ATDU with a 30mm autocannon, I can at least blow its tracks off if I just put enough shots into it, and then with him tracked sideways on in front of the rest of my team, it should be relatively easy for them to kill him. I said it should be relatively... Alright, I'll keep him tracked. Come on, somebody shoot him. No, he's a Challenger 2, don't fire the missile. There we go, he's dead. Oh, and here comes another one. And once again, the T15 has the armour to go face to face with a machine like a Challenger 2 while you wait for the team to stop pointlessly firing missiles into this guy's cage armour. Tell you what, I'll track him as well. There you go. Somebody shoot it, please. I'll get around him. Bingo, he's dead. Hooray! You see, the team works. And with no further threats detected, I think I'm going to cap. And just have a look at the sloping on the frontal armour of this thing. Look at that. Look at that. Keep the front pointed towards the enemy. Also notice the diesel smoke coming out of the engine compartment at the front of the vehicle there. A further indication, as if the state of the health bar wasn't enough, that you've taken some damage here. So, mission complete. And remember, I'm running a premium account here. I've got 2 different global boosts running, and I've got a metric butt-ton of insignias equipped on this T15 for the course of this match. Let's see what sort of rewards I got out of this game. Oh, that'll do. Just short of 60,000 reputation or experience for those of you who are new to Armoured Warfare. 374,000 credits. I think it looks like I also earned almost half a bar of crew experience out of that one game, and earned a couple of supply crates, and I wasn't even the best reputation earner on my team. What do I get in the supply crates? They're only steel supply crates, I didn't do that well. Let's have a look. Yep, more stuff. And what's in the other one? Where is it? There it is. And even more stuff. Hurrah! Finally, just before we go, I really should mention that there is also a new premium vehicle that's been introduced into Armoured Warfare with this patch. It's a Chinese Tier 7 wheeled tank destroyer, available from the third dealer introduced into Armoured Warfare a couple of patches back, the Chinese weapons dealer. And it's not bad. It's a 6x6 wheeled tank destroyer with a very punchy 100mm gun. It's blisteringly quick, but it has soggy tissue paper for armour. The gun does a satisfying amount of damage, has decent penetration, and has a pretty quick reload. But top tip, don't try to fight vehicles equipped with autocannons in this thing, unless you've got cover you can pull back behind in between shots, because the armour on this thing is very, very bad. And if it wasn't for my field rebuild kit, that would have been the end of my first experience in the PTL-02 Assaulter. You'll notice that that really, really annoying Super Mario Brothers style sound effect was still active whenever the commendations popped up in this battle. This was literally the first game that I played in Armoured Warfare patch 0.16, and immediately after this battle ended I went into the settings and found out how to disable that intensely annoying sound effect. Other than that though, I really do think that this has been a very, very good patch for Armoured Warfare, and I'm not quite sure what it was about this corner of the map, but the artillery just kept spawning and I just kept killing them. So there's a huge range of other changes that have been implemented in this patch, but I feel like I've covered the big ones. I'll put a link in the video description to the comprehensive patch notes. There's a massive range of vehicle rebalances that have been included. There's just pages and pages and pages of changes. Far too much for me to cover during the course of one video. If you are interested, link to the patch notes down below in the video description. But I do think that Obsidian have done very, very well with this patch. They've nailed the core issues that were wrong with Armoured Warfare, and they've just made it feel so much better an experience. I haven't had as much fun playing Armoured Warfare in ages. They've also introduced, by the way, 3 new PvE maps. Unfortunately, the day I was getting the material for this video, those 3 maps just weren't in the map rotation, so I wasn't actually able to play on any of the new PvE maps or show you those. But despite the fact that I was just running through the same old maps and co-op battles that I'd run previously when I've been playing Armoured Warfare, it just felt fresh, new and different, and I had a really, really good time playing. So that's it for Armoured Warfare patch 0.16. It's a very successful patch for Obsidian, and unusually most of the community appear to agree. Obviously, you can't please everybody all the time, but Obsidian have done a very, very good job with this patch of pleasing as many of the people as possible. Well done, Obsidian. More like this in future. That's it for today, folks. Take care, and I'll catch you next time.
Good work. You cleared the skies for us.